Yo, what is good, everybody? I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. I went out to the bars and the club with my friends, and tonight, after I get this video out, going to play some soccer and squeeze in a workout. So, it's been a really fun weekend for me. I hope it could be said the same for you guys. But, anyways, we're just gonna hop into the video. Very interesting spot. The market really should be getting a drop soon, but there's so many people shorting, which is something I've been stressing over the past few weeks. So that's just kind of what we're gonna talk about and kind of see where everything can go from here. And just kind of like a quick little insight, um, with the overall market, SPY really is the one that's not doing a lot of moving. But if you look at some of the other stocks like Amazon and Tesla, those ones are moving and you can see direction in those. So while we're waiting on the overall market to start dropping, it might be worthwhile to just kind of keep an eye on these individual stocks. So let's get into it. Make sure to share the video some love, give it a like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So start off here. We got oil. So last week's video we were looking for that drop, and it finally happened. Now the one big thing I was talking about was it was kind of an interesting scenario because we had that fundamental factor where it was sort of like artificially giving oil a floor at 80, but with technicals it should go under 80 for the pullback, and at least get to that 50% to the 61.8% for that retrace. That's just how the market works. That's how Elliott Wave works. If you've been watching my channel, you know what I'm talking about. So we're getting that retrace. I would be looking for a retrace of a smaller retrace of the bigger retrace soon. So maybe we get one more low and then we bounce up. But yeah, you can kind of see the higher time frame sort of setting up for at least some sort of balance. So that's I think what I'm looking for. We were talking about how we want that gap to get filled and how commodities really like to do these stop loss hunts when they have big gap ups. They kind of float and then they do one more spike and then they drop. That's what happened. It just like clockwork. That's what natural gas does. After like kind of like big gap downs, or it's usually gap ups, I would say. Gap ups. That's when it normally does this kind of stuff. So um, I think we're looking at some more downside. If not, we should get some sort of pullback and then go lower. Natural gas. This one really interesting. It's been basing for quite a while. We're getting those divergences on the higher time frames. Just kind of that bullish nature on that MACD, where it's just kind of finally starting to shift. So yeah, histogram is green. This is the weekly too. So this is pretty, I would say, significant. Significant's the right word. The MACD's crossed over, so natural gas, it's looking solid. It might need to base for a little longer, but nothing goes down forever, nothing goes up forever, and this has gone down an unbelievable amount with zero bounces. So we're looking at upsides here in the future, but for now we're just gonna kind of see what it needs to do in the short term. So going back into the short term, we're gonna zoom back in here quick, and really the only thing that I'm looking at is this region. So we broke out and we came back, and it's really sloppy around this region, but I really want to see this area hold its support. We stay above it. It's kind of a wide region, as you can see. Like, we definitely went below this, but it's kind of a wide range. I don't know if I want to like draw this range all the way down here, but it's like around this region where I'd like to see it stay above it and continue to run up, and especially get over that high and start a new 5-wave development like we got back here. So not much more to say than that. Just waiting a little longer. On natural gas, we got a big gap up here which will get filled in the future at some point. US dollar, this is that channel we were talking about. It's going to break out at some point, but the big thing we talked about was, if we come back up here, we could get some sort of failure, come back down, hit this support, and got a couple supports down here before some point, eventually, we're going to break out to the upside of this channel. So I'm not sure when that is. If we can hold it outside of this channel, then we can see some continuation, just move up a little higher, and from there I would probably be looking at this region right here at the minimum, 103 like 60ish, and it can definitely go higher than that, but that's just where I'd be kind of looking for a start. and yeah, we'll just see what it wants to do. Right now, just we kind of need to see what it's gonna do with this channel and this trend line right here, if it's gonna hold it or not. Apple, Apple is going to die at some point. But if you remember, I believe it was 2 weeks ago where I first mentioned this possibility that I was looking at. We could be moving up to the 170s. So I'm getting that from this fib extension, which the mid 170s, you have a very small gap right here. You have a volume node that's kind of acting as incentive to get tested. See how sellers will come in at this region. I mean, this thing has done nothing but just up, up, up. So if there's incentive to take profits and sell, especially if you're going to get into kind of a distinguished supply zone, which is right up here, which is like 175 to like 172, that's a pretty big incentive for people to finally take some profits, as well as this gap. There's a lot of reasons. So, very interesting spot here. We got rejected at the top of this wedge trend line right here, which you can see this line right here. We got a really clean rejection off of that, and there's kind of a lot of supports around here. Like you got support with multiple touch points. So I think it's. I'm not saying that Tesla or Apple's just ready to like plummet straight down from here. I think it might need. It could happen in a day, I guess. It just needs. What I'm saying is it needs to get past all these supports. It's on top of this support, which, I mean, it's not necessarily a support at least yet. It needs to kind of confirm it. It hasn't really done that. It sort of did it here, where you can see there's a lot of wicks going under it, and it kept closing above it and gapped up. But that's not how it works. You can't move up. Let's see how much this is. You can't. Apple can't just make a 35% run into the literal biggest resistance there is by like $1 and then just test it and keep it as support. That's not how it works. That's not sustainable. So this is gonna come down at some point, but it needs to just kind of chew through these resistances, and maybe it does fill that gap. But for the meantime, just I think it's smart to be a little more patient with Apple here, because I do think this thing is setting up to absolutely get obliterated. And another example of this that I'm watching is Microsoft, which I want to talk about in a little bit. So Tesla, very interesting. So one thing I want to point out is where we got rejected from. So well, I guess it already kind of happened, but something I just noticed was this is the 50% retrace of this downwards move, which I believe I did point it out already, but that's just kind of something to show the relevance and importance of knowing how to put down these like Fibonacci levels, because it acts. All traders, or not all traders, but a lot of traders use this to trade, and as that is the case, that just kind of creates this, like, I guess, almost a social construct of where it forces these levels to become really distinguished and really important in the market, because everyone's looking at them, everyone's using them, and they become important because of that. So that just shows the relevance of these fib levels. So got rejected off of that hard, and we're in this triangle, and I was saying it's an interesting spot because the 4 hour, it was right here, it was starting to cross over on the MACD, and I said if this crosses, we could see it move back up. That's the top of that triangle, and sorry, that was an alarm. If that happens, then that's where we're going to be watching to see what happens at the top of this trend line, and you could see a big breakout or a rejection and shoot it back down to the downside. Now that was not the case, and it just broke down to the bottom. So that gap, we've been watching that since we were back up here, and we're looking for that Elliott wave structure where it would look like an ABC, where you have your correction to the downside, and it would be likely that that gap gets filled in the process. So then it did this massive bounce with this kind of like weird fiber structure, which we were talking about, which threw me off a little, and it's still kind of throwing me off a little. But now that we're below it, it's a little interesting. So I think I would now like to see that gap get filled. But now you got I don't know if that gap's unfilled or not. I haven't really checked. But this is kind of the more important gap to be looking at right here, as well as that one. But I don't think that's going to get filled for a little bit. the more important one is just this one, the closest one, the most recent one, and the biggest one. So uh, there might be some like form of like a shakeout or just kind of like tracking people. Fills that shoots down, almost fills it shoots down. There's a lot of things you could do, I know, but really the big things to be watching are just these two gaps. And if we can get that wave filled, this could just be a correction before moving up higher into like towards 300. And another big thing to be looking at is the fib retrace levels for this range here. So this is acting as incentive that 61.8% retrace is right at the top of that gap fill. So it would not surprise me at all to come down, hit that golden pocket, and then continue higher. So a lot of things to be looking for, but we'll just see what it does with these gaps early on this week. I don't think it would take the whole week to find out to react with one of these gaps. So maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll see something. Amazon, we're looking for that 140. We've been looking for a major move since all the way back down here when we were trading down in this channel. The channel is going to break out at some point, and we're looking for this gap to get filled at least. And it shot a little higher, came back down, and then we're looking at probably more upside because of this massive wedge structure that we were looking at. So the wedge structure, just the way it works is you go up to the 50% to the 61.8% retrace, and that's just how it works. Time and time again, it's my favorite pattern to trade. I've seen it hundreds of times easily, and that's where I like to go. And there's a lot of incentive for the golden pocket to get hit. The golden pocket, you got a gap here, massive resistance. It's gonna be a very interesting range. If it gets over like that 124, 125 level, I think it's a straight shot to 140. So for now, it's just started breaking this region, which is a really interesting region because there's not exactly like really distinguished volume nodes of supply and demand here. You're gonna have some trouble at 108.50ish, right around here, and 114ish. But above 124, I think it's a straight move to 140. So just kind of keeping an eye on that. Not too much else to say. I gave you everything you need to be looking at, be watching for. So keep Amazon on watch. This could be a nice runner. Microsoft. So this is pretty similar to Apple in terms of this gigantic wedge structure, rising wedge structure. So Microsoft should be looking at a disgusting drop soon, like nasty. I would say easily down to 260, maybe lower. It just kind of depends on how high it gets so that we can draw out this fib range, because if it goes higher than this, then these levels are going to change. So like if it fills this gap, then these values are different than they were before. So right now, if it fills that gap, 50% retrace is 260. But if it's the top where it is now, that's 250. So we just kind of got to figure out where that top is, and then we'll have a little more to work with. I'm not exactly really sure how to like draw this out. This could just be this kind of like much wider thing, but then you have to wait a much longer time because they might have to drift sideways and then break down, or there's a lot of things it can do when there's so much space in between that bottom trend line, which is why I like to have this trend line drawn closer so that I can just kind of see a little more interaction with it and everything. But it's either this or I think something like this. So this is what I'm looking at right now. Two pretty significant trend line touches and reactions. You can see that up here. So we're under this trend line, but we might need to see some more consolidation, even more upside. You got some unfilled gaps. So Microsoft, it's going to take time. Smart to be patient, but there's going to be a lot of money to be made once this thing gets absolutely obliterated. Biotech, not too much to say here. Actually, there is something to say here. So we were looking for a move back up into this resistance. We were talking about this is going to be like a 40% move, and that's a 40% move there. So it's done basically a triple top with this. I'm going to turn off extended hours. So yeah, basically triple top so far. You got these divergences here. It's better to see them on the higher time frames So it hasn't necessarily started like showing signs of divergences or that kind of reversal up to the 2 hour. Everything past that, there isn't really anything yet, but I would definitely expect a harsh rejection off of this. Maybe to fill that gap. Then maybe just keep going higher after that. But just to that gap fill is 14% from here, so that's not too bad at all. Um, so I think that's what I'm looking for now. But if it starts breaking over, you can really start ripping here. But we'll just kind of see what it does with this past support, which is now a major, 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 major resistance. Um, yeah, other than that, there's not really too much to say. There's a few ways you can play that. If that turns out to be the case, you could go long on Lab D for that kind of bounce. Yeah, there's definitely a couple ways you could play it. So keep your eye on that. Biotech, you could see some nice rejections. Semiconductors. So we're gonna look at SOXX here. I am astonished how this is still holding up. I mean, I think it's blowing everyone away, just because of how like powerful and like resilient this move is. It's done nothing but up, up, up. Like Nvidia, AMD, it is nothing but up. And I'm glad I didn't try to catch the short with everyone else in the market, because I've seen a lot of people get absolutely destroyed on the short positions, just trying to catch specifically Nvidia, and it just kept going. So right now, it's interesting. You're under this trend line here, and I think for kind of like safety measures and just kind of to see what other lines we should be watching, I think this is another really big line to be watching. There's plenty of ways you can draw it. These are the lines everyone's going to be looking at. So these are the lines that are relevant. So actually, this line is pretty interesting right now. It's definitely trying to put up a fight here, and this is something I saw last week. You got this kind of like support right here, where to keep kind of bouncing off of, and this could also be a wedge. So you could somehow see another kind of like shoot it to the upside, which it's crazy, but I mean, it's honestly not that crazy considering what the semiconductors have been doing. So, a few things to consider, I guess. I mean, it's so set up for downside, but like, you've seen how it's been holding up, so don't be surprised if it keeps going up, gets that kind of breakout. You got enormous divergences, like absolutely enormous. So this is going to fall at some point, but in the meantime, it's putting up a fight. So just keep an eye on these semiconductors. Just these supports, it's got a couple, but it's gonna break down at some point. It cannot do this forever. The VIX, not too much to say here with this one. Nothing really new. It broke down under that support, and this could somehow be a fake out, but it's getting to that point where when you break under like a big trend line like this and you don't pop up above it like quickly, then it starts to become a little more to the point where it's like, okay, this might not be a fake breakdown. It might keep going, but the way the market's set up, it doesn't exactly make sense for the VIX to just absolutely collapse and the market just kind of keeps running without fear. So it's an interesting scenario. The VIX, I don't necessarily want to be bearish on it, even though it's under a major trend line. I would like to see what it does for the next few days. SPYs. So I think the big thing I want to point out right here is the daily MACD crossover on futures. Histogram's going red now, and if you look in the past, every time this has happened, you get a pretty massive move down. Now this move, I think it was this move. I've never seen something that stupid. That was just the biggest stop loss hunt I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, we'll just quickly go back to it. That was the week where we just kept floating, kept spiking up, and then it did this final last spike. That was like it ran up. What is this? 130 points in I think like half an hour. Sorry, my roommates are watching the Wilds game. Not sure if any of you are watching that, but yeah, it gave it right back and then just started to die. So that's the kind of stuff that's been going on in this market. Really, just I don't know. It's hard to play around. You got to kind of take it in consideration with everything you're looking at. But something I'm kind of noticing is we might be in a wedge on the shorter time frames. So this could give us some upside going into the next few days. You know, it doesn't even have to be that big of a jump, uh, because this wedge isn't exactly like steep like this. If it's a steeper wedge, you get kind of a more vertical move. But if it's longer, you know, it doesn't really have to do anything violent. It can just kind of do this slower move up. So kind of an interesting setup. We had these clear, really clear distinguished waves in the beginning, but then it just became this absurd, like just this diagonal chopping to the downside, and I'm not exactly too sure what I want to think of it. So, uh, the big thing to watch, I said this in last week's video, it's this range. The big levels to be watching are 4200 and the 4100 level. And to really be sure of the downside move, under 4080 is when it's really set in stone, and you would definitely see a lot more downside. So, uh, the big range 4200, 4100. Other than that, I don't know. You just kind of got to play it as it goes. So just looking at this trend line, this is really interesting. Uh, we're back under this pretty significant trend line. So it's not exactly like major yet, but you can see if you just kind of look for yourself. I'm trying to get this thing out of the way. Okay, I'm not sure what that is. It's kind of disappearing. There's like a green rock. Okay, whatever. So yeah, you closed underneath it. You can kind of see it bounced off of it several times actually. You can see all these wicks bounced off of it, closed above it with the hammer candle, and then just broke down below it. So maybe we could see some red this week. I'm not confident in saying that just because of how many people are shorting, but one thing I could be thinking of, this is kind of something I've been keeping in the back of my head, is that maybe we drop all the way back down to this line, and if that happens, I would definitely expect some sort of fake breakdown and catch even more shorts. So that would be in an extraordinary trap where it comes all the way down here, you trap even more shorts than there are now, and then you do an insane run back up to 4300. So I think that's kind of what I want to see, to be honest. A breakdown back to this support and then the melt up, because I really don't see how we can get substantial downside with the amount of people that are shorting. There's just not enough energy for more shorts to really pile on and keep driving it down. And any kind of like good news or good catalyst can just send it flying. So uh, I think that's the big thing I'm watching for. Uh, we'll just have to kind of see how it goes on Monday. I think we could definitely see something on Monday if we get some sort of follow through. We'll just have to see how that 4100 level does. So I don't have anything else to say other than that. If you watched the whole thing through, make sure to share the video some love, give it a like and subscribe, and peace out, guys.